Well said. Is this set up correctly? So I'm sensitive to various artificial fragrances, and the boxes that were in that corner were very fragrant, so I'm wearing this, which I think will be a good solution in the future if there are fragrances here. It's the best we have. Is this recording? The best we have, so we'll make use of it. So, sorry if it's chilly. We're just airing out the space so that hopefully by in about a half an hour, I should be able to take this off. This evening, we have the opportunity to talk about anger. Pilgrim, in her book, discusses anger as one type of negative emotion that it's important to work through. And anger, she notes, is a very powerful emotion. It has a very intense impact on our bodies. When anger enters our bodies, when anger begins to move through our bodies, it can often be very difficult to maintain control. And part of the reason for that is that anger is so very energetic. And the suggestion that she gives to the problem of that energy taking over so that we lose control and resulting in unskillful and often unfriendly actions, the solution she gives is to use it, to turn it in a productive direction. And that general point, she divides into two possible paths. So one path is productive exercise. So some kind of exercise that's healthy, you have a lot of energy in your body due to the anger, put it to work, giving you some kind of healthy physical exercise. The other is to put it to work accomplishing something that requires a lot of energy, like mowing the lawn or moving boxes, whatever it would be that requires a lot of physical motion and force, put the anger to that use. Now, both of these approaches can be described in similar terms, and those terms then can be applied to emotions in general. So the terms, in my way of understanding it, and in terms of the methods that have worked for me, in terms of working with negative emotions and particularly anger, the basic point is stay in your body, pay attention to the body sensations, do not associate those emotions with thoughts, and stay with it until it turns into flow and passes away of itself.
So sick to run is Russian, two name look then you got or at least sick to peace of it. Can I put him on the sick to the sick of Tana? You know, the chin in the hollow, let my bone, let my below. Pillar the Gina Pillar the hollow, the beam of Tupa. My to a 200. Land to it in one like you're chipping at the body.
Because even though it might seem like simple sentences, when we actually try to put this into practice, it can be extremely counterintuitive to the point of being offensive. You know what I mean by offensive?
Yes, but could you please say?
So I'm going to say that process again, because even though it makes sense in words, when we actually try to put it into practice, sometimes it feels counterintuitive, and even we can get upset by it.
So to be on top of your own man, about your dead hand, the good dead hand, you know, had a hand, and I can move out of the you're in the doma. You got sick of that. Now you're cut out.
The process is stay with the body sensations. Do not associate them with thoughts, and continue to stay with them until they turn into flow, into just energy in your body, which then passes away of itself.
So the pure don't just see the check out, sit love is around it, but he's sick of Canada, much. Do you check out Eddie Howell? But there is a money, Eddie Hava, who are the land where they live, who are the Nasha, Eddie she needed Harvey, who are the she needed time, BBP, or the pure don't just
Now, this can feel very difficult, and that process, if we try to put it into practice, can itself make us feel upset. Because something comes up, some negative emotion, anger, sadness, fear, whatever it is, and we typically immediately associate it with a thought about other people, how they're right or wrong, a thought about ourselves, how we're right or wrong. This happened, so I feel this way. That didn't happen, so I feel this way. And we get caught up in those stories.
So do we not stick to this one? That is sick of Bayana, so they are Mujina, they are chicken. So stick to this, so that to meow. Baja punya parado meeting with the Eddie Hamabe. Nobody, Tanya lady, I'm going to suck up.
But the way I was taught meditation in Asia, when a body sensation arises, which could be a negative emotion, we identify it and then we stay with it. We just stay with it without buying into the thoughts about it. Stay with it until it passes away. This is a very specific method that's based on the motivation, the goal, to transcend, that emotion and actually transcend ourselves.
သွားအာရှမှာဘုရားသားထင်ခဲ့တာတဲ့အဲ့ဒီမှာသူမိလန်ကဘာပြောလဲဆိုတော့စိတ်တူလာပြီးဆိုတာလေအဲ့ဒီစိတ်ကိုပေါ့နော်စိတ်ထဲမှာမှတ်ပြီးသူနဲ့တူတူနေရတယ်အဲ့ဒီစိတ်ကိုလည်းစိတ်နဲ့ပေါ့ငြိမ်ငြိမ်လေးနဲ့နေပြီးတော့အဲ့ဒါမှတ်ရင်းနဲ့ပဲဒီဒီနဲ့တက်သွားတာအဲ့ဒီမိလန်ကိုနေရတယ်
And that motivation to transcend ourselves isn't always very motivating.
ဆိုတော့အဲ့လိုမျိုးလုပ်ရင်းနဲ့ဘာလဲဒီစိတ်တူတဲ့စိတ်အနေတခြားကောင်းတဲ့နေရာတွေရောက်လာတဲ့အကြောင်းပြောတာပေါ့ဒါပေမဲ့အဲ့ဒီလိုရတဲ့ဟာကဒါအဟုတ်ခက်တဲ့အတွက်တကယ်တော့လူတွေမလုပ်ချင်ဘူးပေါ့နော်စိတ်တက်ကြတယ်
A lot of the time, the motivation to protect ourselves is stronger than the motivation to transcend ourselves.
တော်တော်များများလူတွေလုပ်ချင်တာကစိတ်တူကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကိုကောက်ွယ်ချင်ကြတယ်ကောက်ွယ်ချင်တဲ့စိတ်ကပုံရတယ်ဆိုတော့နားလည်မှုကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကိုနားလည်မှုရသွားတဲ့ဟာမလဲကြတယ်တဲ့ကိုယ့်ကိုယ်စိတ်တူတာ
And a lot of the time, the motivation to attack ourselves is stronger than the motivation to transcend ourselves.
တော်တော်များများလည်းတဲ့ကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကိုပြန်ပြီးတော့တက်ခိုက်ကြတာနားလည်မှုတရားရသွားမယ့်အစားတော့နားလည်ကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကိုနားလည်မှုအစားဒီကိုယ်ကိုပြန်တက်တာဟာ
Now, when we transcend ourselves, of course, we transcend others. And a lot of the time, that isn't a very strong motivation. A lot of the time, the motivation to defend others is stronger than the motivation to transcend them. The motivation to attack others is stronger than the motivation to transcend them.
တော်များများကလည်းကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကကိုယ်စီရတယ်ငွေချင်းဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကကိုယ်ပေးခြင်းဆိုတော့တရားရအောင်တကယ်တော့ကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကိုတရားရအောင်ဒီမှာနည်းနဲ့လုပ်လိုက်တယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုယ်တရားရတယ်ချားတယ်တရားရတယ်ဒီနားလည်းပါဒါမှမဟုတ်တရားတယ်ဒီနားမလို့ချက်စိတ်တူတယ်ကိုယ့်ကိုယ်ကကိုယ်တယ်အဲ့ဒါလည်းပိုင်းနေတာ
But if we can take this method seriously, that we find the body sensations and then we stay with them without associating them with thoughts, then suddenly we gain countless opportunities through the day to practice meditation, to practice mindfulness, to practice for transcendence, unconditional happiness.
တကယ်တော့ဒီခဏဒီစိတ်တို့စိတ်ကိုမှတ်ပေါ့နော်မှတ်ရင်နဲ့လုပ်ရင်နဲ့တကယ်တော့လုပ်ဆက်ပြီးတော့ညားလာတယ်ဆိုတာလုပ်နေတယ်နေတိုင်းလုပ်နေတယ်တရားကျက်နေတယ်ဉာဏ်နဲ့ပို့လာတယ်ဒီမြင့်မြတ်တဲ့စိတ်ကိုရလာတယ်
Because we start to notice that the sense of self is strengthened by the process of associating body sensations with thoughts.
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. We notice that the sense of self is strengthened by the process of associating body sensations with thoughts.
ဆိုတော့အဲ့လိုမျိုးတရားထိုင်ရင်နဲ့ခန္ဓာကိုယ်ကဘာဖြစ်မှာလဲဆိုတော့ကိုယ်ခန္ဓာကိုယ်ကိုသိလာတာပေါ့နော်ကိုယ်သိလာတဲ့အဖြစ်ကတဲ့အဲ့ဒီခန္ဓာကိုယ်ကိုကြောင်းလဲစီတယ်ဟုတ်တယ်
And that's why when I was practicing at the monastery in Japan and something like this came up, I was taught, don't look away. Now, of course, that's metaphorical. You're not looking at a feeling, you're feeling a feeling. But it's a little bit less clear to say, don't feel away. Or when you say don't look away, I mean, don't look at the images in your mind. But stay with the body sensation. Just stay with it. Just stay with it. And this is taught emphatically because it's so difficult for us to believe that that would be of any use.
So သူကအဲ့ဒီအာရှမှာပါတရားထိုင်တဲ့အချိန်မှာဒီလိုလုပ်ရတာအောက်ခက်တာတကယ်တော့ဒီစိတ်တူတဲ့စိတ်နဲ့နေဖို့ဆိုတာအောက်ခက်တာဆိုနေရင်အဲ့ဒီစိတ်ရလာတဲ့အချိန်မှာခန္ဓာကိုယ်ကပြောင်းလဲလာတဲ့ဟာကိုအင်းဘုဒ္ဓ
It seems to us like telling a story about the sensations, turning it into something that's all about me or you or us or them, that would really help the situation.
So to get all that for me, didn't it? Can you repeat it? But I'm not going to do it. You know, the child will be down here. You know, sit on you. You have to be down here. You know, they are hanging in the for me, didn't it?
But it's actually quite rare, in my experience, that adding a lot of self-centered thoughts onto uncomfortable body sensations, it's quite unusual that that's very helpful. So, for example, right now, I can't breathe very easily. This mask gets sort of moist and then air doesn't travel through it very easily as I breathe. So I'm suffocating up here. That creates a lot of unpleasant body sensations, partially due to oxygen hunger and partially due to emotional reactions. Simultaneously, I have to use a lot of force to talk since it's hard to hear me. But usually to talk loudly, you can at least open your mouth, but I can't even open my mouth very wide. So I have to use a lot of force, which means I need more oxygen. And through all of that, it's sort of chilly, so I'm a little cold. And I could right now be spinning a story about how hard it is for me. I have this condition and I'm a victim and people don't think about things correctly. Why don't they take better care? And everyone's a jerk and I'm flawed and this is never going to work. I could be doing all that. See, I just did it. I can do it. It can be done. But up until that point, I hadn't done that. And I wasn't doing it while I was saying other things. And so we gain, if we master the ability to just stay with body sensations, we gain a certain amount of control and authority over our minds. You can do it. So what happens instead? What happens instead is that all of those same body sensations still arise. They still come up, but they arise simply as information. They arise as a direct experience that contains knowledge. There's a sense that I'm asphyxiated, that I'm suffocating, but I can tell that I'm gonna make it. It's been 20 minutes. I haven't died yet. It's likely that I'll make it. It's more important to give a good talk. And so those sensations can simply be there, rippling around in my body, without becoming a distraction from the task at hand.
So တော့ခဏလိုမျိုး तू ကဘာမှမပြောဘဲနဲ့နေလိုက်တဲ့အတွက်တိတရားတစ်ခုရလာတယ်အဲ့ဒီတိတရားကတော့ဘယ်လိုကြည့်လဲတဲ့ဆိုတော့ဒီဖြစ်ဖြစ်နေတဲ့ဟာတွေအကုန်လုံး तू ကခဏလိုမျိုးငြိမ်နေလိုက်တဲ့အတွက် तू ကလည်းသိသွားမှာမဟုတ်ဘူးပြီးတော့ဒုက္ခလည်းဒီလိုခဏဒုက္ခပြီးတော့ပြောနေတဲ့လူတွေအများကြီးဆိုတော့တရားဟောရတယ်ကောင်းတယ်စသဖြင့်နားလည်တယ်အတိတရားတစ်ခုရမှာ
And because of that, because they're experienced as flow, as bodily flow, rather than an object that has to be explained by other objects in an explanation that frankly never ends. There's no end to that explanation. We can keep on explaining for as long as we want. Because that's not happening, and there's just the direct body sensation, that experience is an opportunity for transcending myself rather than accruing, developing a sense of self.
ဆိုတော့ခဏတိတရားကအရေးကြီးတဲ့ဟာဘယ်မှာရေးကြီးလဲဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒီတိတရားကိုရပဲပုံတော့ဟုတ်ပါတယ်။တဏှာထဲမှာနေလို့ရတယ်တဲ့။ဒါပေမဲ့တိတရားရလာပြီဆိုတာနဲ့အဲ့ဒီလူကပြောင်းလဲလို့ရတယ်ဆိုတော့ဖွင့်ရတာ။အဲ့ဒီပြောင်းလဲလို့ရလာတယ်ဆိုတော့ဖွင့်ရကိုသိခဲ့ဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ခန္ဓာကိုယ်ကပြောင်းလဲဖို့လူတရားပြောင်းလဲဖို့တအားခက်တယ်။
And that means that no matter what, that I know, that no matter what terrible thing may happen to me, that may be hard, of course. It may be hard if I'm blamed for something I didn't really do. It may be hard if I'm physically attacked. It may be hard if I'm chilly. It may be hard if I'm misunderstood. May be hard if I get angry at something. There may be things that come up that are hard. But every time those things happen, no matter what happens to me, no matter what anyone does to me, I know that within that, there is the opportunity to transcend the suffering that comes with it.
So စိတ်တော်တဲ့ဟာအမျိုးမျိုးဖြစ်လာတယ်တဲ့ခဏဟာလည်းဖြစ်နေတယ်ချမ်းသာလည်းဖြစ်နေတယ်ညာလေးပုံမလို့တာလေးပုံမလို့တာလေးဖြစ်နေတယ်အမျိုးမျိုးဖြစ်လာတဲ့အချိန်မှာခုတိထားဖို့အဲ့ဒီစိတ်တော်တဲ့အင်းတွေအားလုံးအကုန်လုံးပုံမှာပြောင်းလဲနေတဲ့ခွင့်ရတစ်ခုရှိတယ်ဆိုတာတော့အရေးကြီးတာသုံးချတက်ပေါ့သုံးချတက်ပြီးသုံးချတက်ရင်စိတ်တော်လိုက်တဲ့တိုင်းမှာစိတ်တော်လိုက်တဲ့အချိန်တိုင်းမှာခုပြောင်းလဲနေတဲ့ဟာတစ်ခုရှိတယ်ဆိုတာသိတာ
That means that I can look forward to everything that will ever happen to me.
ဆိုတော့အတိတ်ကတဲ့စိတ်တော်တဲ့တိုင်းမှာချိန်တိုင်းမှာပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ကညှိလို့ရတယ်ကောင်းတဲ့ဟာလေးတစ်ခုဖြစ်လာတော့မယ်ဆိုတာစိတ်တော်တော့မယ်ဆိုတာနဲ့ဟာကောင်းတဲ့ဟာတစ်ခုတော့ဖြစ်လာတယ်ညှိလို့ရတယ်
Because let's say something good happens to me. Okay, good. That's fine. That means I can just be happy. So that's good. I can look forward to being happy. Let's say something bad happens to me. Now that's great. Because probably painful emotions will arise with that. And then I can stay with them. Stay with them without adding on a story. Stay with them until they of themselves pass away and I become free from them. And then I can directly experience that which is free from self, that which transcends me.
ဆိုတော့စိတ်တူတဲ့အချိန်ကျလို့ရှိရင်လည်းတော့ကိုယ်ဝမ်းသာရတယ်ဒုက္ခရောက်တဲ့အချိန်ကျရင်လည်းတော့ကိုယ်ဝမ်းသာရတယ်ဒုက္ခရောက်တော့ပဲစိတ်တူပြီးဆိုတာနဲ့ဟိုကောင်းတဲ့ဟာကိုဖြစ်တော့လို့ဆိုတာသိချင်တယ်ကိုယ့်ကိုပြောင်းလဲလို့ခွင့်ရပြီဆိုတာသိချင်တယ်ရှိတာအဲ့ဒါကြောင့်စိတ်တူဝမ်းသာတယ်
And then if I get good at that over time, then it might even be possible for me to have that same experience with good emotions. Even when good things happen to me, I can be very happy.
ဆိုတော့အဲ့လိုမျိုးထပ်ထပ်တလဲလဲဖြစ်လာတယ်တွေ့ချင်ခဏခဏမျိုးသုံးချဖြစ်တယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အကြိုက်ရင်ကိုမှာကောင်းတဲ့ဟာတွေဖြစ်လာရင်အဲ့လိုမျိုးခံလို့ရတယ်ဆိုတော့ကောင်းတဲ့ဟာတွေတချို့ဟာတွေရတယ်ကိုဖြစ်စီစေတဲ့ဟာတွေရှိသေးတယ် ဆိုတော့ဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုကောင်းတဲ့ဟာတွေကြီးကိုဟုတ်တယ်အမှန်လို့ရတယ်
So then everything that happens is an opportunity for practice.
ဟုတ်တယ်တွေ့ကြည့်မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ကိုယ်လုံးကတရားနည်းနဲ့ကြည့်မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဆိုသည်ဖြစ်စေကောင်းသည်ဖြစ်စေကိုယ်လုံးကကိုကြက်ရင်ကိုမှတ်ရင်အကောင်းရှိပဲတဲ့
The last thing to say before we begin that practice is that I know I myself have had a lot of trouble with anger in my life. And I know how hard it is to break certain patterns. There are certain deep emotional patterns that we have that result in certain behavioral patterns, which may not be beneficial. And we can go years or decades still falling into those same traps. And this simple method is the basic way to become free from those traps, from those patterns.
ဆိုတော့နောက်ဆုံးပြောချင်တာကတဲ့ဥပမာနဲ့စိတ်ကြတဲ့အားတွေအများကြီးဖြစ်ခဲ့ပါတယ်တဲ့ဒါပေမဲ့ပြောချင်တာဒီကိစ္စနဲ့ဒီကားလို့ဒီဟာလေးကိုလည်းဆုံးလေးချင်နေတယ်ဆိုရှင်တဲ့ကိုကိုကိုတန်ရာနဲ့လုံးဝမနေကြဘူးဒီချစ်လေးရပေါ့ဒီလေလက်တွေ့ကြတဲ့ကြ
And that's the reason that in so many spiritual traditions, pain, asceticism, difficulty is praised, is practiced, is maintained. It's not that the people who are practicing it hate themselves and want to punish themselves. It's that there's a deeper sense of joy and peace that they can achieve. And that starts to feel more important than the untrustworthy forms of joy and peace that we can achieve through getting what we want.
အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်မို့လို့လည်းဒီအချင်းတက်တက်ဒီဘုရားဘာသာတရားမှာခြားတရားတွေပါတယ်။ဒါဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီဒုက္ခတွေစိတ်တွေတက်တဲ့ဟာတွေကအဲ့လိုနေရာကိုသင်ထားတာတဲ့။ဘာလို့ဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒီအရေးတစ်ဆင့်ရလာတဲ့တရားကိုမှာအကတရားစစ်စစ်ကိုပြောနေတာ။တရှိမှုဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီမှုစစ်လို့ပြောတာ။ဒီအဲ့ဒီကနေပြီးတော့မရလိုက်တဲ့စိတ်တွေခံရတဲ့ဟာတွေလည်းအတူတူပါပဲတဲ့။စိတ်တွေပြီးတော့ဒီချင်းမြင်ရလာတဲ့တရားကိုတော့ဒီနေ့ဘုရားဘာသာတရားမှာစိတ်တွေတက်တာကိုဘယ်ရတာလဲ။ဟုတ်။နေ့လိုနေ့တစ်ချက်ကိုသင်ထားတတ်တယ်ဒီနေ့မှစား။
So let's practice it. I know it's a little bit chilly, so that's great for this exercise. That's the reason that we, at the monastic academy, we keep the temperature right about this all the time through the winter. Keep it at just about 50 degrees inside to be sure that everybody has this opportunity to work through uncomfortable body sensations. I can't stress enough how much uncomfortable body sensations manipulate our perceptions and behaviors. or to be more accurate, the way our aversion to uncomfortable body sensations, how much that motivates the way we perceive and behave. So this is a great opportunity for us. Take a moment to straighten up and settle in. And bring your attention to your body. Pay attention to what you're feeling. Whatever it is that you're feeling, simply feel that. You might be feeling relaxed, or you might be feeling energetic. You might be feeling emotional. You might be feeling peaceful. You might be feeling subjective experiences, or you might be feeling objective experiences, such as the feeling of your chair or the temperature of the room. In any case, whatever you're feeling, feel it. If you notice that you're thinking about it, return to feeling it. So for example, you may be feeling cold, and you may also have the thought, I'm feeling cold. Return your attention from that thought to the feeling. if you're finding yourself staying with the feeling or able to return to it quickly if you become distracted by something else, and that's very good. That's establishing concentration. If you find that you're having thoughts about the feeling or about the technique, example, the thought, I feel cold, my stomach is full, I feel happy, or I'm supposed to be concentrating on feelings right now. Thoughts that are about the feeling or about the technique we'll call subtle distraction. It is distraction, but it's subtle distraction. And it can be useful, especially at first. Other thoughts that are added on to that, such as it's cold, I wonder how long until it gets warm. It'll probably be about 20 minutes. Sure do hope it gets warm sooner than that, but it probably won't. I remember last year, such and such happened. Or this is how I'm supposed to do the technique, but I'm not doing it very well. It's too bad. I thought I'd be better at this by now. Or I'm really good at this. Wow, I'm really doing this technique well. That's what we call gross distraction. That means that we've taken 2 or more steps away from the feeling in our bodies and drawn out an extensive story about it. If you find subtle distraction, that's okay, make use of it. Make use of it to bring yourself back into the direct experience of feeling. If you have gross distraction, then intentionally take a deep breath, quietly so it doesn't distract others, in order to return you to your body physically. Breathe in and then breathe out. And then from that point, continue with the technique, directly feeling whatever you're feeling at this time without giving attention to thoughts about it. if you find that you are distracted by thinking, it's possible to make use of that. Because that thought may make you feel something. You may have an emotional reaction to that thought. And so you can go from the thought to your body's reaction to it. Now, your body will react to it in one of two ways. Either it will react to it or it won't. If it reacts to it, then notice that emotional reaction. If it doesn't react to it, then notice that sense of peace, of non-reaction, of stillness in your body as a response to that thought. Having done that, stay with body sensations. Stay with body sensations. And in fact, this can be used for any distractions. Whatever our attention goes to, we can pay attention to our body's reaction to that. There will either be a reaction or there won't. If there's a reaction, we pay attention to what that feels like. If there's not, we pay attention to what that feels like. And in that way, everything becomes a path back to body sensations. And then we stay with those body sensations. Without buying into a mental storyline about them. But if we do think about them or get distracted by something else, and we can pay attention to our body's reaction to that. And as you pay attention to the body sensations, begin to investigate them, examine them. Where in your body do you feel them? Is it a large area? Is it a small area? Is it two-dimensional or three-dimensional? If it's three-dimensional, is it flat, like a pancake, or round, like a ball, or amorphous? Are there clear boundaries, or certain parts of your body feeling that more intensely than other parts? What are the qualities? Is it emotional? Is it physical? Pleasant or unpleasant? Energetic or restful? Does it seem to be moving, or is it stationary? Is it spreading? Is it shrinking? Is it becoming more intense or less intense? Examine this. Be aware of these various characteristics moment to moment of whatever body sensation you have. Examining it moment by moment. Examining it. Investigating it. Exploring it. Carefully attending to it. What is it? Where is it? How is it? Without turning any of that into words, into descriptions. Feel it directly. There's no need to worry about whether you're right or wrong. That's just a thought. But if you have that thought, how does it make you feel? I'm right, I'm wrong. I'm doing it well, I'm doing it badly. I can do this, I can't do this. If you have that thought, how does it make you feel? Is that feeling pleasant or unpleasant? Do you feel it in your whole body or just part of your body? Is it changing or is it stable? Is it intense? Is it diffuse? Examine it. Examine whatever you're feeling, moment to moment. If you'd like, in order to make concentration consistent, you can intentionally use thinking to concentrate. We turn thinking from a distraction into a tool through labeling. If you'd like, label the part of your body where you're feeling. Label that in your mind and pay attention to it. If you have a thought, And you can label that also as thought. But then examine where in your body are you reacting to that thought? If nowhere, then that's your whole body. Your whole body is reacting to that thought with peace, with serenity. And you can label your whole body at other times as well. So in your mind, you may experience a stream of thoughts like this that indicate how your attention is traveling through your body as you practice. Maybe something like this: hand, hand, head, thought, head, head, thigh, foot, 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 whole body, mouth, thought, chest, belly. You may experience something like that. Allow yourself to label what's happening in this last portion of the exercise. This is a time for questions, comments, discussions, anything you'd like.
Knowing that we do this practice for our own benefit and the benefit of others, a dilemma sometimes I experience is that not only am I able to perceive those emotions and feelings arising in myself, but I believe one becomes even more astute to see it arising in others, and we practice for others. So my dilemma is, how does one in a compassionate and skillful way, point that out to others who perhaps aren't practitioners, that get caught in loops of causing more suffering, emotional suffering in themselves, and doing it in a way that is free of judgment, but coming from a place of care. And I don't always know how to do that.
It's a good question. And yes, we know that it can happen, that sometimes we're more clear about what others are feeling than they are. And in the same way, we're sometimes more clear about what others are feeling than what we are feeling. And sometimes others are more clear about what we're feeling than we are. And sometimes others are more clear about what they're feeling than we are. So we're aware that those various situations can arise. And in particular, let's say that we believe that in a certain situation we're more clear about what someone else is feeling than they are. There are two, you could say, if you want, you could divide it up into two different paths forward, two different kinds of reaction to that. One is that, yes, the word you used was see. We can see what others are feeling. Sometimes we can feel what others are feeling. Would you agree with that? Sometimes we can see it. Sometimes we can feel it, and sometimes we can see it and feel it. And in terms of the exercise that we just did, in terms of that specifically, yes, because there are different ways of working with this, but in terms of that specifically, if we feel it, then we simply work with that feeling without any added thought about whether it's mine or theirs. So in a lot of therapeutic settings, it's considered extremely important to be able to draw boundaries and to be able to know this is mine and this is yours. And that is very valuable. That's an important part of life, skillful living. But from a certain perspective, the one that we were taking with this exercise, it is important to not draw those lines, to not think about whether it's mine or yours, but to simply work with the direct feeling that we're feeling in that moment. So that's one response. One response is to, when we think, oh, this person is probably thinking this thing, or this person is probably feeling this thing, the only thing we do is drop that thought and feel whatever we're feeling. Perhaps in response to that, perhaps in ourselves, we don't know anymore. We simply feel what we're feeling. So this is a different approach than we often take, but it's a useful one. The reason it's useful in terms of helping them, because that's, I think, your question. Well, okay, you can do that. I can see how it would help you. You might be thinking, would help me to work through that feeling, but how would it help them? And my question after all was, how do you help people? So this is how. It's true, we're very contagious. We're emotionally contagious. Human beings are very impactful on each other. And let's say that you're right, that they made you feel a certain way. Let's just say that that's true. It could be true. It's often true. Well, then it's only reasonable to think that you might also be contagious to them. If they can infect you with their emotion, you might be able to infect them as well. So we can take it one step further, because oftentimes if someone comes who's sad, we try to be happy. So they're making us feel sad, so we're going to try to make them happy. But with this technique, we don't try to do that at all. On the contrary, we, in their presence, respond skillfully to sadness. Yes? Let's just say you're right. They have sadness. That sadness enters my body. In that moment, we respond skillfully to that sadness without saying it's yours or mine, without any concern about whose it is, where it's coming from. We simply respond skillfully to that sadness. If we do that in their presence, then they will pick up on that. They will then respond more skillfully to that sadness in that moment, because we're contagious. So if you respond skillfully to the sadness in their presence, then they will suddenly find themselves responding more skillfully to that sadness. So rather than taking a view of you're sad, I'm happy, I don't want to be sad, so I'm going to make you happy. Rather than all of that extraneous material, which and in this technique we call all of that extraneous material, in this perspective, rather than that, there's simply the feeling of sadness. I don't need to know whose it is, where it's coming from, or why. There's just the experience of working with it skillfully. And if it is the case that we're contagious, then anyone around me will immediately be more skillful at working with sadness. So we're teaching, you could say, without labeling ourselves as teachers or others as students. All of that isn't needed. There's just the reaction of skillful emotional experience, moment by moment. So in that way, it helps people without us consciously saying, I'm helping you. Without that happening in our minds, there's no sense, I'm helping you. There's just a skillful reaction. So that's one approach, of course. Another approach is, as you say, to point it out. If that's what you asked about, how do I point it out to them? And in that way, of course, I don't have the answer of how we point it out to. Everybody needs a different way of having these things pointed out to us. Sometimes it's appropriate to point out to us, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you were the right person to point out, sometimes someone else is. All of that is complicated, and I am certainly no more skillful than you are at making all those judgment calls, so I don't have anything to teach you on that front. So I'll set that aside and leave it to you to make those decisions, since you're very good at that. I would say, though, that there's an indicator about whether we will be skillful. Whether we'll use, for example, whether I will use our best judgment in a given moment regarding whether we're going to help them or not. Will we point out to them skillfully or not? There's an indicator. There's something that you can measure and then make a relatively accurate prediction about whether you're going to make use of the good judgment that you have in that moment. And that is, are you pointing it out to them for their benefit or not? Is that really why you're pointing it out to them? And so we each can pay attention. Oh, I feel some aversion. I don't want to feel this way. I wish they would stop feeling this way so that I don't have to. If that's happening, it will probably be conveyed. And the pointing out may not be as effective as if we have sat still for a long enough time to have sadness arise sufficiently for us to become comfortable being sad. And for us to know it breaks up into flow, it passes away because everything's impermanent, and I'm fine. So however much sadness comes in, I'll be fine. However much anger comes in, I'll be fine. However much fear comes in, I'll be fine. However much shame comes in, I'll be fine. And we've confirmed that. And because we've confirmed that, if somebody is giving off various emotions, you know the most contagious one of all? Does anyone know the most contagious emotion? We measure this. Oh, yes, you're right. Well, actually, I don't know that you are right. I don't know that you're right. The most contagious negative emotion? But probably laughter is quite contagious. There's another one that's the most contagious. It's been measured. You can actually measure this stuff. It's loneliness. It's loneliness. It's really interesting because if you, let's say that someone has a bit of loneliness, their loneliness is more contagious than friendship, which means that it is which means that if there's a group of friends and someone in that group starts to feel lonely just because sometimes emotions come and go in an arbitrary way, it is actually reasonable, if you think about it from a certain perspective, for the group to start to exclude them, to avoid the whole group becoming lonely and the whole group of friends breaking apart. Because loneliness is more contagious than friendship, than friendliness. So when we have a bit of loneliness, it suddenly becomes likely that people will start to actually, which is then evidence that we are alone. So we feel lonely. So people generally subconsciously move away more. We don't usually know at this point what's happening. It's usually subconscious for us. So we move away a little more. So then wow, people are really moving away from me. I'm so alone in the world. But that loneliness, it's contagious. It isn't about, feelings are contagious. They aren't as, sorry, but they aren't actually as connected to objective circumstances as we often would like to believe. We can just feel lonely even though actual objective circumstances haven't changed at all. We can just feel lonely, but then that feeling can create objective circumstances that validate that subjective state. So anyway, sorry about that little thing. I find it very interesting. In any case, there is this sense, there can be the sense of that, of those impacts. Yes, there's that sense. But for us, good news, get enough stuff coming up inside of us that we can work through it until we gain the confidence to know that whatever comes up is going to be okay. Have that directly, we're then able to receive that without aversion. Because we're not responding from a selfish perspective, trying to push them away, I don't have to feel the way you feel, there is an element of connection there. And because of that connection, the pointing out process, which, as I say, you're skilled at, will probably work better. And so this is an important point because it's so common. It happens so much for me as a meditation teacher, as a daily experience for me, that someone will have a negative emotion and will tell me that there's something going wrong in their practice. I don't know what to do. It's like, how do I say? It's like someone said, you know, I invested my money and it's really having a big return. What do I do? I have a huge problem. I don't know what to do. It's horrible. I'm dating someone and we're getting along great. What do I do? Should I break up with them? Yes, I'm doing meditation and negative emotions are arising. It's not working. What are you talking about? So I don't know how to, it's very hard to respond to that. You know, sometimes we're just totally irrational. And that's an example of pure irrational behavior. And sometimes we just don't make sense. We do things that just don't make much sense, you know? And in the same way, we're sitting, negative stuff arises and we think it's not working. Sometimes we just don't make sense. It's great that that's arising. This is exactly the circumstance in which that should arise. It's the perfect opportunity to experience that fully, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. It passes away and you realize, oh, I'm fine. It didn't kill me. Oh, well, that changes everything. That means that the next time somebody has that, gives me that feeling, I can continue to be friends with them. Well, that changes everything. That changes the course of human history. And that's really helping people. So when those things arise for us, one of the first things to look at is, am I trying to get rid of this from a selfish perspective? Yes. And we can measure that typically through noticing how much aversion we have to the arising of that. Open to it and know, okay, one more thing that's going to come and go. All right. Well, I get through that whole process, I get to experience the joy of friendship. So no problem. I'm fine. I'll be fine in any case. But this person might not be. So maybe I'll point it out to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
In the same subject.
Mhm.
It was interesting that you were talking about this, like, a physical sickness absorbing as
Mhm.
physical
Mhm.
sickness. Because you could also say that the reason why you absorb something is there is your immune system is not strong enough,
Uh-huh.
or you have that sickness
Mhm.
in yourself.
Mhm.
So then, rather than working on, so you're saying work on it within yourself, because you're feeling it in yourself. And then, in other words, if we're stronger,
Mhm.
then we're not going to be picking that up in the same way. And then a strong person who, a lumberjack, is going to sit beside you, you're sneezing, and he's going to be fine. I'm not. I'm going to pick it right up, So I want to strengthen the immune system by getting rid of whatever in me resonating. So I think that's what you're saying. It's not like you're saying, okay, that person has this, and it's true for loneliness too. I mean, why is loneliness the most contagious? Because more people experience loneliness than the others, perhaps.
Mhm.
That it's so universal, and when in fact we're all one,
Mhm.
we actually feel all this separation. So then you can contemplate that as well as feel that.
Yeah, right. So this actually, I would say this is then a third, and there are actually many. I said two, but that was just because of time limitations. There are many different reactions, and this is another response, which is valid. And that is that we intentionally purify our hearts, our minds, our bodies of those negative emotional states. That's a completely valid reaction. And then as we purify, there's a strengthening process, as you say, in that. And that's very powerful. So on the one hand, we awareness of certain negative states. We may also intentionally fill ourselves with certain positive states. And that also is an excellent response, an excellent way to work with this. Is that what you're referring to?
I would say that, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's another, and there are many, and that's another very, very good way to work with it. And the correct approach, it isn't that there's a correct approach. There are different approaches for different people.
Yeah, but I really appreciate also saying, it's not necessarily somebody else's that is dumped on me.
Mm-hmm.
It's me.
Yep. Right, and it often is. Right.
So the recommendation has been return to sender, because I'm an empath, and I don't need all this stuff. But then I also have to recognize what
That's
is
right.
me.
That's excellent. Right, exactly. And so then that brings us also back to a certain extent to the other point, which is another way to think about it is sometimes it makes sense to make a division between what's yours and what's mine. That's what I think you're saying. And that's completely valid and is often necessary to be healthy enough to start not drawing the line between me and you. You don't want to just force ourselves into that position because it often isn't healthy. It's very important psychologically, interpersonally, socially, emotionally to have those clear lines. So I certainly, in case, I don't think you did, but in case anyone misunderstood, I'm not saying that's a bad approach. I'm simply talking about another approach. And I'd say that traditionally, first, in the training that I've done, traditionally, the first thing is make those clear boundaries and work with what's inside of me. That's the first thing to do, because if we don't have that yet, then it's very difficult to have the stability part. The next part is then don't draw those lines and work with whatever arises without distinguishing between inside and outside, me and you. But without that foundation of a healthy self, healthy sense of self and personal responsibility, without that, then it's very difficult to do the other. And then furthermore, it isn't like you just finish and then you can do the next one. We do this one to a certain extent and work on it in certain ways, and then change and do something else. And then we may find it's useful to go back. We enter a more challenging situation, or something is triggered that we didn't know about before, and so we work through that. And I think that one of the most difficult aspects of the contemplative tradition worldwide is that there are so many different effective methods that it's confusing. And if a certain teacher says a certain one is good, it's easy to interpret that as saying that everything else is bad. This is right and everything else is wrong. And sometimes people actually say that. So it can be quite confusing. And a lot of the time, because it's so confusing, we would just prefer if it were simple. And so it's easier to think, well, everything's just wrong except for the thing that I've found. But I believe that it's useful for us to have, to challenge ourselves to have more maturity than that. And accept that there are a lot of different possibilities, and that one is valid and effective doesn't show that another is invalid and ineffective. So I like that you're bringing up different points, especially if anyone interpreted what I said earlier as some kind of criticism of the importance of drawing boundaries and taking personal responsibility for stuff that is our own. Mm-hmm.
Already answered it, but so what I experienced was I remember like feeling angry about something. Ooh, let's look into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I was like feeling into it in my body, and then I felt this really big sadness.
Right.
And the sadness that I felt overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard to stay with it.
Right.
It was
Right.
yeah. And I might like was telling out stories like, what am I sad about? And
yeah.
Did everything I could to sort of get away from feeling sort of felt like a deep well.
Yeah.
Sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it is. And often so I'll say a few things, and I have the sense that you might be also asking what might we do about that.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
So a few comments first. So it's a really good point. It's courageous of you to bring it up, and to, even while still experiencing it, I think to a certain extent be able to describe it so eloquently. But a few things that I and others I've worked with have sometimes reported after examining such an experience, because you're not alone in having this kind of experience. Join the club, right? It's that's the good news. You can, no loneliness here. You have that kind of experience, you have a lot of friends. So so when we examine it, there are a few things that are sometimes found, which you may or may not find, but these are trends which are worth looking out for. One is that when it's that profound, one of the things that can happen is that because of its intensity, you said it was big.
Yeah.
Yes? Because of its breadth, its depth, because it's so big, it feels that then, as you said, overwhelming. But one of the ways that it seems overwhelming is actually that it takes up so much space in our experience that our thinking process stops functioning very well. And it's as if the thoughts are pushed away to a certain extent, like they can't get back in. So we can't figure out, where did this come from? What is it? When is it going to end? That's the big
Right,
one.
that-
When is it going to end is the big
Yeah.
thing that we want a
wanna know.
conclusion about.
Yeah.
But we don't get those things. So the first thing to say is that can be seen as a huge opportunity, because suddenly the technique that we were just doing is easy. Right? Suddenly you're not having thoughts about it that make any sense. You're not coming up with a story that you believe in. Nice work. Yes? But since we often base our identity in those thoughts, it feels like it's going to kill me. But that's because the thing we're calling me, my explanations and stories, just aren't functioning as well. So that's something that we can sort of ease into to a certain extent. And I'll talk about, again, what one might do about it in a moment. But the other point is, if you examine very closely the auditory, you may find that you don't have a clear explanation of where this is going to end. But even more significant for most people is if you examine the visual. So you have an emotional reaction, your auditory thinking isn't able to explain it away. And so you look at it, you look at the shape of it, and you don't see an end. It's like a well, and you're looking down into that well. There doesn't seem to be a bottom. You can't see it. And because the visual indicates that it has no end, we start to believe that. Now, in talking about what we might do about it, there are a number of things. One is, if you turn your attention, it sounds crazy. That's why I said it. This might even seem offensive. Earlier I said that, remember? Maybe you couldn't hear me. I had a mask on, but it can seem offensive to be told this. So sorry if this is hard, but if you turn your attention away from those thoughts, this will never end, visually and auditory, and stay with the body experience. Oftentimes, it stops being overwhelming. It's the combination of the body discomfort, the body horror, and the mental commentary about it that A, doesn't make much sense, and B, the one message you're getting is, this is never going to end. There's no guarantee of an endpoint, and then that triggers more fear and sadness, which justifies the thinking and makes it even more panicked. And then we're in a loop that can feel overwhelming. But if we can turn our attention away from the thoughts and back to the body sensation, it's quite common that it stops being totally overwhelming. And I've been through what you're saying a number of times. And at those times, I'm sorry to say this, but I think it's sort of respectful, especially since sometimes when I say, set aside the thoughts or in terms of the emotion, that can almost feel insulting because it seems impossible. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to let you know I actually know what it's like by telling you this. Not that you may experience this, you may not, but I have experienced this. There is actually the belief, literally the belief. I'm not exaggerating this in any way. There is literally the belief, if I stay with this, it will kill me. There's a true belief in that. It will actually kill me. And the only way that I was able to do this, not that you have to experience this, no one else may experience it, will kill me. That's okay. You don't have to. I'm not saying you should. We're talking about me, so it doesn't seem like I'm talking down to you and saying, hey, you should just set aside the thoughts and have emotions, blah, blah, blah. I'm actually saying something that is significant for me.
the way I got through it on a few occasions was saying to myself in a way that I think you can understand the import of this. Okay.
Let it kill me.
Yeah, and the phrase that works for me is, this may kill me, but I won't live with it anymore. I'm either going to find the end or I'm going to die, but I won't live like this anymore. I won't live motivated by this subconsciously ever for another day. This is it. It's going to end one way or the other right now. That's how it has been. And it's that serious. So there's a surrender to wherever this leads. And I definitely don't know where that's going to be. And even after I've gone through it a few times with different emotions, in the moment, I still can't believe, oh, it's okay. I went through this. It worked out great. I can't believe that, even though it did. At the end of each of those episodes, I've experienced such joy that I couldn't, not that I didn't, I couldn't stop dancing around for hours. And yet in the moment, I'm not thinking about the joyful dancing. This is going to kill me. And then just, oh, okay. So that is part of it. But another part of it is what I said before. And we're over time, so this is going to have to be the last response, even though there are a few more. But this is another suggestion. That is to intentionally pay attention, to intentionally pay attention to the flowing part of it. So rather than paying attention to it as sadness, pay attention to it as energy, as an intense flow of energy through your body. And attend not to the sadness part, but to the energetic part. And then it may not end, but we're not paying attention to the part of it that's so unpleasant. We're paying attention to this flow, which we may then notice is actually coming and going. And when we notice the simple point that this sadness comes and goes, that sometimes it gets more and sometimes it gets less, just that insight, what do they call it? It hurts, it deeply wounds. I don't know what the right word is. It injures, it breaks the conviction this will never end. Because if it's impermanent, it's hard to still argue that it will never end. And going. So probably it could end. Probably. It sometimes goes away a little bit. So maybe it could go away. There's a little bit of sense that this might work out. And because of that, we can relax into it a little bit, and then typically we can work through it. So attend to it as flow rather than as emotion, even though it is an emotion, but that emotion is flowing. I'm sorry, it has to be quick, but, and there are other ways, again, these aren't the only right ways of working with emotion. That's what we have time for. Yeah, thanks for the courage and eloquence in asking that. So now we have the chance to talk about some ways we can serve. So why don't you get us started?
Well, there's a really awesome event coming up on Saturday, November 19th, landing, and it's I'll get all the details out for you in a second. So this is the 2016 Climate Solutions Summit. It's hosted by Energy Independent Vermont. There's going to be a lot of workshops and brainstorming sessions, and speakers, including Soryu, will be on a panel. And it's their kickoff effort to try to get a carbon tax passed for Vermont. It's free. You can register online or on the phone. I have all the details here if you want to know more information. But Main Street Landing in Burlington, Vermont, Saturday, November 19th.
At
Main Street Landing?
but what time?
Oh, I'm sorry, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Any other? Yes.
At 2.
Mm-hmm.
Also at Main Street Landing on November 16th at 6 p.m., there will be a showing of a documentary called Resilience. And I think it's very fitting for tonight's conversation because it's really about the courage to heal and to keep going. And it should be a wonderful evening. And December? Yes.
December 1st and 2nd at Lake Maury is a conference that the foundation, I'm getting that right.
ACEs. It's based on the ACEs
Yeah.
research, adverse childhood experiences. A lot of you are like, oh, I've heard that. Yeah. It's about the research about the adverse childhood impact it can have on the community and public health. And it's put on by the Department of Health. And we're looking to pull together all walks of life, every walk of life, to come together to learn more about how we can prevent, combat, sit with some significant pain of our young people in this community. And it would be great if you could come to that. And I have a flyer, I can with more details, but I will be there. Love for anyone to join me. Super important for Vermont youth, because suicide is the second leading cause of death in Vermont for our young people ages 9 to 20. And that's a big deal. Yeah. And there are 19 deaths a year.
And the impact on younger children, as from utero all the way up through with those risk factors.
And it looks like I will also be speaking there. Like I'll be, I contact them and it isn't finally scheduled, but I may be leading a meditation session there. Yes.
Thank you.
So this is a very busy time at the emergency food shelf. It's very wonderful the generosity of the community leading up to Thanksgiving. There are lots of food drives that deliver tons and tons of miscellaneous canned goods which need to be sorted out. And she contact the food shelf just has a new volunteer coordinator. I can't remember right now, but they need lots of volunteers.
Very good.
Some good news about that, if you're a member of City Market and you volunteer for the food shelf, those hours will go towards your membership, so you get discount on your.
Very good.
Vote if you haven't voted.
Yeah.
We'll be having a Thanksgiving event on the 23rd. And there's more information on little flyers out there.
So where is it?
It's at our home in CML in Johnson, Vermont. And it's from 2:30 to 6 p.m. and it'll be a potluck. And we have a page open so you can find each other to carpool if you'd like. And we'd like you to RSVP.
So it's Wednesday,
Yes.
just before Thanksgiving. Great. We hope you all come. It would be great. We have plenty of room and we can make plenty of food.
You turn the thermostat up?
Yes. Yes, we will. Yeah. We'll have a nice. We'll have a blazing fire. Yes, it'll be great. Yes, really. Yes. Very good. Good to see all of you.
We're also going to introduce our two.
Oh, good. Yes.
We're just going to have Misha. Do you want to go ahead?
Hello, everybody. My name is Misha Arden, but you can call me Misha. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. One interesting thing about me is that my hug machine is broken. And yeah, we're doing fist bumps. If you want a fist bump, you know where to find.
Washington, and interesting thing about me is I like to sweep and mop and clean dishes and dance.
Are you single?
Explain that.